Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you're all doing well. So for today's case, we are talking about a woman named Britney Lyon, and today's case is truly every parent's nightmare.
The defendant is a monster. There's just no other way to describe it. Absolute monster for the havoc that she's wreaked upon our society. It's deplorable. It's disgusting.
Because Britney was a babysitter, and she looked after some of the most vulnerable children imaginable. But things took a very sick and twisted turn, because Britney had a pedophile boyfriend. So she decided to take advantage of her position. She brought those children back to her home and delivered them to her boyfriend. And he did the worst things imaginable to these children. I can't believe this even happened. It truly is the stuff of nightmares. Well, today's case is definitely going to be a heavy case. It's not going to be easy to listen to, but let's jump in. And I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is HelloFresh. And you guys know how much I love HelloFresh. I don't know how I used to figure out what to have for dinner. Well, I can remember, because I used to get so stressed and I used to get so bored of dinner time, and that was until HelloFresh entered my life. Because oh my god, the meals from HelloFresh are to die for. I recently made the super quick chickpea and mango curry, which was just absolutely delicious, but it was so easy to cook. That's the thing with HelloFresh. It's so easy, but it's just so delicious. And recently I have been getting more into the HelloFresh desserts, because you should never skip the sides or the desserts from HelloFresh. They are just as good. And I recently made the salty caramel speculoos homemade ice cream. It is without doubt one of the best things I have ever eaten. It was so good. I made it with my husband Ashley, and we were both surprised at how easy it was to actually make, but we both were obsessed with it. There was enough to have like a decent bowl for 3 nights in a row, and those 3 nights were glorious. Every week I am now looking for it from HelloFresh. I really hope that they bring it back. And that is what I love about HelloFresh, is that you get to try new things. You never know what's going to be available. It is perfect for busy family lives. It makes planning and cooking so much easier. It's always packed full of fresh ingredients. It makes me feel like I'm making healthier choices, but in a simple and easy way. And when your box is delivered, you can just get straight to cooking. There is no faff. And then you are left with a super delicious home-cooked meal. And I have never been disappointed by a HelloFresh meal. And you can take advantage of HelloFresh by using my code DanielleKirstyFM for 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. And I told you, don't skip out on the sides or the lunches or the breakfasts or the desserts, because they're just as good. So that is 1 free meal per subscription box. Free meals applied as a discount to the first box. New or returning subscribers only, and varies by plan. So sign up today by clicking the link in my description box and use my code DanielleKirstyFM for 10 free meals and free breakfast for life. And using my code really does help out this channel, because it lets HelloFresh know that you came from this video. So thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, but thank you to every single one of you watching. I truly mean that, because without all of you guys, I wouldn't get opportunities like this. And now let's jump into today's case. Britney Lyon was born in 1994. An exact date of birth is not known, and she was born in San Diego, California, where the rest of today's case takes place. And we actually don't know too much about Britney's childhood. We don't know if there was any trauma. The only thing that we know is that Britney, from a very young age, there was one thing that she had a huge passion for, and that was young children and babies and looking after them. She was one of these young girls that had a load of dolls and like a load of those babies, and she would play pretending to be their mother, and she loved looking after all of her dolls and her babies. And as she moved through school, as she moved through high school, this passion was still there. It only continued. And all of her studies in high school were geared towards her having a career related to some sort of childcare role. She was also planning to go to university after high school to study child development. This really was a passion that Britney dedicated her whole life to. She knew what she wanted to do from a very young age, and she stuck to it. However, there was one significant thing that happened to Britney in high school that would possibly change everything. She would meet a boy called Samuel Cabrera, who is the other evil perpetrator from today's case. And things go downhill very quickly from here. And we actually don't know too much about Samuel's background either. We know that he was born in 1994, the same year as Britney. Again, an exact date of birth is not known. I assume they were in the same grade at high school. However, there was one thing that became very clear about Samuel, especially when he was in high school. and that is that he was a massive pervert. Oh yeah, the red flags, the warning signs were right there from the very beginning when it comes to Samuel. So Samuel was one of those boys who went around his high school and he sexualized every single girl that he came across. It was very disrespectful, very disgusting. He was incredibly vulgar and very inappropriate. And Samuel, he's a teenager, he's developing like his sexual interests, figuring out what he likes. And there was one thing that he settled on that got him off more than anything, and that was voyeurism. He got off on secretly spying on women and girls getting dressed in the locker room or going to the toilet, or just spying on women and girls when they weren't aware they were being watched. He was the type of person that would sneak around his neighborhood, peering into windows, hoping that he would catch a woman or teenage girl or even just a child getting changed. And it was known around the school that Samuel liked to do this. He had a reputation of doing this. So Britney, she obviously learnt about his reputation. Now, I don't know about any of you, but that should have been a red flag. Why would you want to go with a boy that has this huge reputation of basically being a pervert? However, Britney didn't seem to mind that at all. She just seemed to look past the fact that he was this pervert, and Samuel and Britney, they got closer and closer. Samuel was showing Britney a lot of attention, and I assume it was a lot of sexualized attention because that's the kind of person that Samuel was. And Britney seemed to enjoy this kind of attention she was getting from Samuel because she had struggled to form relationships with boys. And I think she was just happy that any boy, even though it happened to be a pervert, was showing her attention. So as they grew closer, they did start dating officially in high school, but Samuel's perverted behavior only got worse and worse. Because by the time they reached their final year at high school, they are both 18 years old. They are currently dating and they start a sexual relationship and they are having sex constantly, and I truly mean that. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. They are a young couple. However, it became very clear that Samuel was demanding a lot more sex than what was probably normal. He wanted to have sex with Britney pretty much 24/7. He didn't care where they were, what they were doing. He just wanted to have sex. Like, that is literally all they did, multiple times a day, in the most inconvenient places and times. And Britney just had to go along with what Samuel wanted. She definitely struggled to keep up with his sexual demands. So this goes on for a few months. They are pretty much constantly having sex. And this is when Samuel goes up to Britney and tells her that he is no longer sexually attracted to her like he once was. Yeah, I'm not kidding you. He just literally says those words very bluntly to Britney. He's like, yeah, I'm not attracted to you anymore. And Britney was very heartbroken. She was very taken aback. However, this is when Samuel, for the first time, revealed to Britney all about his interest in voyeurism. He started telling Britney that what got him off more than anything was him spying on women and girls when they weren't aware. This was his thing, this was his favorite thing to do, and he actually said to Britney that the only way he would be able to be sexually aroused by Britney again was if he was allowed to spy on innocent, vulnerable women at the same time. But not just that, oh no. Samuel had another very bright idea because he was like, oh my God, Britney, you're a girl. You can go into changing rooms, into bathrooms, into locker rooms. You have access to all of these women getting changed and going to the toilet, having a shower. So he wanted Britney to go into these spaces to record women having a shower, getting undressed. I'm not joking. This was what Samuel demanded. And I assume that he wanted Britney to go and record all of these women in vulnerable situations so he could then watch those recordings as he's having sex with Britney. And what did Britney say to this proposal? Did she say, hell no, that's sick and twisted, I'm not doing that? No, she didn't. She actually just agreed. Which makes my blood boil. That she wanted to go into these spaces and abuse women's privacy in this way to please her sick and twisted, perverted boyfriend. So from this moment going forward, Britney would now enter into these spaces to secretly record innocent, vulnerable women for her boyfriend Samuel. She would go to shopping malls in San Diego. She would go into stores such as Forever 21, and she would go into the changing room and secretly record other women getting getting changed. Now, I don't exactly know how she was doing this. I can only assume that she had a camera of some sort and she was like placing the camera like underneath the changing room. Like, was there a gap at the bottom or was she going over the top? She was clearly doing it in some sort of inconspicuous way because she was never caught. But either way, it is just so disturbing to think about that happening. I mean, being in a changing room, being in a locker room is a situation that we've all been in. And just to think of somebody violating your privacy like that and you don't ever find out. I just feel so sorry for all of the women that were recorded by Britney and they have no idea. She would also go into the locker rooms of various gyms across San Diego, secretly filming women as they got changed, got into the shower, were completely naked. She also recorded women and girls on the toilet. And what is just so disturbing is that eventually Britney and Samuel, they actually made a custom device to make it easier for her to record these women. So Britney had a handbag and there was like a hole cut out of this handbag and then a GoPro camera was placed in the bag so it could record through the hole in the bag. So Britney would just have her bag on and she would just be walking around and she would be recording women and the women around her would have no idea. And then she would take those recordings back to her boyfriend Samuel for him to get himself off on. And she would watch him get himself off. It just blows my mind and it makes me sick to my stomach and it makes me so angry. And things go on like this for a while until they both eventually graduate from high school. Britney starts studying at a local college trying to get her child development degree. And what is Samuel doing? Well, Samuel is doing absolutely nothing. Just sat at home being a pervert. Now, Britney and Samuel, they are living separately at this point. They actually never lived together throughout the entirety of today's case. And whilst Britney is at university, this is when something very significant happens to today's case. And that is that Britney becomes a babysitter. Now, we can only assume that Britney started babysitting with innocent intentions because we know from a very young age she has always wanted to work with children. She's now at university studying for a degree to work with children. So whilst it may have started off innocently, it definitely does not end that way. So Britney makes her profiles on all sorts of different babysitting websites such as care.com, sitter.com and sittercity.com. And she makes her profile. She says that she is a college student, that she absolutely loves working with children. And she also says in her profile that she specializes in working with children with special needs. And it doesn't take long until Britney starts getting her first clients. And who were her clients? Well, of course, they were just normal families across San Diego that required a babysitter. Britney began babysitting for various different families. She would go to their houses and everything was above board and great in the beginning. And because of Britney's profile, and she said what she specialized in, it didn't take Britney long to start working with families whose children had special needs. And these children, they had various different needs. Multiple of these children had been diagnosed on the autistic spectrum. Some children had more advanced needs than that. Some had significant development delay. There was one child who was 7 years old who still couldn't dress themselves or bathe themselves. And there was even one child that was still completely non-verbal. However, all of these parents trusted Britney because she said in her profile that she specialized in these areas, working with these children. One parent said that they did all the checks, the references, everything. They really looked into Britney and everything checked out, everything looked great. However, what these parents didn't realize at the time is that Britney was actually a wolf in sheep's clothing and things were about to turn into the worst nightmare imaginable. Because we now get to late 2014. Both Britney and Samuel are now 20. Britney had been working as a babysitter for a few months at this point, and like I said in the beginning, everything was fine. But what happens next? Well, this is when her pervert of a boyfriend started to get bored again. He was bored of voyeurism. He was bored of Britney going out to the mall and recording these women getting changed. Like, that just wasn't getting going anymore. So where did Samuel turn next? Well, tragically, I am afraid to tell you that Samuel now turns into a full-on pedophile. He began watching all sorts of child abuse material online, and he realized that this was now his thing. This is now what got him off. And this is now where this case takes a horrific turn because Samuel realizes that his girlfriend Britney is a babysitter. She basically has access to children whenever she wants to, and he begged her to let him be around them. And unbelievably, Britney, like she always does, she just wants to please Samuel, like keep him around. She agrees. She agrees to now let her pedophile boyfriend be around children that are in her care. And I need to warn you now, things in this case are incredibly difficult to listen to because it is now January 2015. Britney had been babysitting a particular girl for a while now. And I should say that we don't know any of the victims' identities in today's case, so this young girl, will just refer to her as Girl A. She was 7 years old, and this girl had pretty significant special needs. She's one of the children that we mentioned earlier. She's actually the girl that is completely non-verbal. She was also unable to bathe herself, unable to dress herself, so she really did need a lot of care and attention. And Britney had been going over to Girl A's home during the week to look after her, whilst Girl A's parents were obviously out of the home. And Britney got so close to Girl A that she asked the parents if she could take Girl A out on outings, take her out for like a little day trip. And Britney also said that taking Girl A out on these trips would help her with her university degree because she's working on a particular research paper. Now, Girl A's parents, they completely trusted Britney. So far, Britney had been an incredible babysitter. She seemed to be really close to Girl A. So immediately, Girl A's parents were like, oh my God, this is great. This will be great for our child. They thought it would be a good opportunity for their child to get out and about. It could help their development. So they agreed straight away to allow Britney to take their child on day trips out. However, what they didn't realize is that Britney had something far more sinister planned. Because as soon as Britney had unrestricted access to Girl A, she could now take Girl A whenever she wanted, drive her anywhere she wanted. Britney only had one place in mind that she wanted to take Girl A, and that was to her pedophile boyfriend Samuel. And Girl A's parents had never once consented to this. They knew that Britney had a boyfriend, but they had never once consented to allowing that boyfriend to be around their child. So already Britney is overstepping the boundaries here. She should not be allowing Girl A to be around anybody that Girl A's parents haven't consented to. But I think, as we all know, things are going to get so much worse. Because as soon as Britney arrived at her boyfriend, her pedophile boyfriend's home, she arrived with Girl A. Samuel asked for Britney to take Girl A into his bedroom, to which Britney did. Britney willingly took that girl into her pedophile boyfriend's bedroom. Samuel then told Britney to wait outside, which again, Britney did. So now Samuel, the pedophile, is alone with this vulnerable, innocent 7-year-old girl. And 20 whole minutes pass. God only knows what is happening in that room. It is just so heartbreaking to even think about what could be happening in that room, but I think we all know what is happening in that room. And after the 20 minutes were up, Samuel called Britney back into his bedroom, where Britney found Girl A stood at the bottom of Samuel's bed, completely undressed. She was naked. To which Samuel then said to Britney, "Get her dressed and get her out of my home." To which Britney did. She did all of this willingly. And tragically, this is now where the horrific sexual abuse began. Because Samuel has now manipulated Britney into getting what he wanted. He now had unrestricted access to Girl A. And Britney kept bringing Girl A over to Samuel's home. And this didn't happen on just 1 or 2 times. It happened on multiple separate occasions, at least 15 that we are aware of. 15 different occasions. That is truly, truly heartbreaking. And Samuel was abusing this poor young girl in the worst ways imaginable. And Samuel was also trying to justify this absolutely horrific abuse to Britney by saying that it helped with his chronic back pain. And I'm just like, what? Abusing children helps with back pain? How in the world did anyone buy this? But apparently Britney did. I just cannot believe that Samuel is telling Britney that the only reason he is abusing children is to help with his back pain. And what makes all of this a million times worse is that Girl A was non-verbal, so she couldn't even report any of this to her parents, which breaks my heart on so many levels. And this is exactly why Samuel and Britney were targeting girl A in particular, because she was nonverbal. They were taking advantage of that. And this is how they were able to get away with abusing girl A, because they abused girl A for so long. They are truly evil monsters. And Samuel is abusing girl A for quite a long time. But as always, he gets bored. He always gets bored. He always wants more. Samuel now starts demanding more from Britney. He wants more victims because Britney has access to so many children. It's not just girl A that she's babysitting. And tragically, this is when Britney allows Samuel even more access to more of the children in her care. And the next victim that we need to talk about, we will call Girl B. Britney had been babysitting Girl B for a while now. Girl B's mom was a woman called Luann, and it absolutely pains me to say this, but Girl B was only 3 years old. Only 3. Just 3 years old. So Britney goes over to Luann's house one night. Luann is getting ready for a night out. She had already put Girl B to bed. So all Britney needed to do on this occasion was literally just sit there and do nothing. Only do something if Girl B woke up. So Luann, she goes out for the evening. She returns home. She thinks that everything is okay. But what her 3-year-old daughter told her the next day absolutely shocked her to her core. Because Girl B told her mom that when Britney was babysitting the night before, her boyfriend had come over and the two of them together had changed Girl B's underwear. And Luann was speechless. She was like, what? Her daughter was supposed to be asleep all night and she was under the impression that that is exactly what happened. But now she's hearing from her daughter that, number one, a strange man was in the house, Britney's boyfriend, who Luann had never met before and didn't give permission to be around her daughter. So not only was there a strange man in her house, but this strange man and Britney had changed her daughter's underwear for no apparent reason. She couldn't believe that what she was hearing could be possibly true. So she called up Britney and pretty much said, what the hell happened last night? And Britney just casually starts saying, oh, the elastic was not very good on Girl B's underwear, so I just changed it, no big deal. But then Luann was like, well, what about your boyfriend? Why was he here? And Britney responded and said, oh, don't worry, my boyfriend was just dropping over some cough medicine. Nothing dodgy was going on. But Luann did not buy this for a single second. Her gut was just telling her, no, something's wrong here. And the first thing that Luann did was she took her 3-year-old daughter to the doctor's office to perform an examination to see if any sexual abuse had happened. And after the doctor's examination, they didn't find anything. However, this definitely does not mean that sexual abuse didn't occur. There are so many different forms of sexual abuse that wouldn't have left a trace. So Luann, after this doctor's appointment, she tried to put the whole thing behind her. She definitely was never going to use Britney's babysitting services again. And she just tried to stop thinking about it, and she just hoped for the best and just hoped that nothing had happened to her daughter. But sadly, it would not be over for Luann and her daughter, and the horrific truth of what actually happened to Girl B would be revealed later on in this case. And sadly, from this point going forward, emboldened by the fact that they are continuing to get away with abusing children, Britney and Samuel, they just continued. They start abusing yet another victim, who is Girl C, and she again is only 3 years old, which just horrifies me in so many ways. They are definitely picking victims that are so vulnerable and are also in a position where they can't report the abuse, because a 3-year-old may not possibly know exactly what is happening to them and may think that what is happening to them is completely normal and doesn't report it. And by the time we get to March of 2016, which is well over a year since the abuse started in the first place, and they are still abusing Girl A. The abuse of Girl A has been going on for over a year. I just cannot believe it. But it was in March of 2016 that they now start targeting another victim. And this victim we only know as Girl D. She was also 7 years old. And what is just absolutely baffling about Girl D is that her mom was a family friend of Britney's. Britney had known Girl D and Girl D's mom for a very long time, which is just absolutely crazy that they are targeting somebody that they personally know. That is how emboldened they are that they are going to continue getting away with this. Girl D was also on the autistic spectrum. She had special needs, and Britney offered to babysit Girl D to help the family out. And of course, because Britney knew Girl D's mom trusted Britney. She had known her for years. is. What was the harm in Britney babysitting her daughter? But horrifically, Britney and Samuel decide to make Girl D their next victim. Again, because she's incredibly vulnerable, they thought they'd be able to get away with it. So Samuel started instructing Britney to bring Girl D over to his home the exact same way that he was doing with Girl A. Samuel would then take Girl D into his bedroom. He would have Girl D lie down in his bed next to him, and Britney would just be sat at the bottom of the bed watching TV, as if none of this is happening behind her. And Samuel was just abusing Girl D behind her. It's crazy that she's literally just watching TV, pretending like none of it is happening. But Samuel actually started using different tactics with Girl D. He would have her pose for pictures and videos dressed in her underwear. And Britney would be on the other end of the camera taking all of these images and videos. Samuel also started to play this very sick and twisted game with Girl D. And Samuel even had a sick and twisted name for this game that he liked to play. And he would say, "Let's play Horsey," where he would make Girl D completely undress so she had no clothes on, and he would instruct her to sit on his lap whilst she's naked, and he would bounce her up and down on his lap whilst he was grinding against her. And he actually enjoyed playing this sick and twisted game so much that he started playing it with Girl A as well. And the abuse just continues to escalate from this moment going forward. The abuse continues to get worse and worse in itself. However, they're now using different tactics. Britney actually starts to get drugs to administer to the victims so they'll be more subdued for Samuel. Britney also started to bind the victims, tie them up. She would also blindfold them. Like, Britney is playing a very key role now. I mean, she has from the beginning, because without her babysitting services, Samuel wouldn't have access to these children, but she really is playing an active role now. And Britney and Samuel, they had this fully fledged system on how they were coordinating all of this abuse. They would be constantly sending each other messages about which victim they wanted to abuse next and what kind of abuse they wanted to do to certain victims and new ideas. And I just cannot believe that they are communicating so casually over message about abusing children. They were now abusing these children in Samuel's home, in Britney's home, sometimes in the victim's own home. They were abusing these victims wherever they could, basically. Samuel now also starts to bribe Britney into allowing him even more access to these children. He would say things to Britney like, "Oh, I'll take you on a date tonight if you let me have access to this particular victim." And Britney would jump at the chance because she was like, "Yeah, I really want to go on a date, so I'll bring you this child." And I just cannot believe that these words are leaving my mouth. This is so sick and twisted that Britney is exchanging a date for a child to be sexually abused. She is their babysitter. They are in her care. She's supposed to be protecting these children. But it gets even worse than that. It always does. Because now Britney and Samuel start recording every single time they abuse a child. They want to save it all. They want to be able to rewatch it. They start building a collection. Samuel instructed Britney to record him every single time he abused a girl. She would also take multiple images. She would make sure that she would get the shot from multiple different angles. Samuel also told Britney to start recording the girls when they were urinating on the toilet. Again, this goes back to what he liked to do with his voyeurism. And I know it sounds like Samuel is doing most of the abuse here. I mean, we know that Britney is obviously playing a very key role, but it does seem like Samuel is the one calling the shots, is the one who is actually physically abusing the girls. However, this is where that all changes. Because unbelievably, Britney now starts participating in the sexual abuse of these children. And we don't know why she does this. Was this at Samuel's request because he got a sick and twisted kick and he wanted to get off watching Britney abuse these children? So was she doing this in some kind of way to please Samuel? Or was she doing this for her own sick and twisted, perverted gratification? We just don't know. But either way, Britney, as well as producing all of these images and videos of Samuel sexually abusing the children, Britney now also starts to appear in these videos also abusing the children. And I just cannot believe how long this has been going on for now. And it's just absolutely sickening that she is using the fact that she's a babysitter as the perfect cover. She has access to so many children. And because she says that she specializes in children with special needs, that makes these children even more vulnerable than they already would be. And it absolutely breaks my heart that they have been abusing children for so long now. However, thankfully, things will soon catch up to Samuel and Britney. So we now get to a little bit later on in 2016. Britney has been babysitting Girl D for a little while now. And Girl D had been suffering at the hands of these two evil monsters for far too long, and she could no longer take it. So one day she went to her mom, she broke down in tears, and she told her mom everything. And I can't even imagine what Girl D's mom would have been thinking, listening to her daughter tell her about Britney, the family friend, abusing her, and obviously Britney's boyfriend. Girl D's mom must have felt so betrayed, so hurt, that someone that she trusted, someone that she had known for years, could hurt her daughter in such a way. And Girl D's mom did not mess around. She went straight to the police. And this is when the police started investigating Britney and Samuel. So when the police start investigating, one thing led to another, and they obtain a search warrant against the couple, and they want to seize all of their electronic devices. However, when the police track down Samuel to retrieve all of his devices, they find out that Samuel has gone on the run. Yes. Clearly, Samuel and Britney got wind that they were being investigated. I don't quite know how, but Samuel had packed up his car, taken all of his devices with him, which contained a number of hard drives that did contain all of the abuse material, placed them in a locked box, threw that in the trunk of his car, and he drove off. And he was planning on getting away with this, and I don't know how he thought that he was going to be able to get away with it. Thankfully, he didn't delete the evidence. He clearly thought that he was going to be able to outrun the police, and he still wanted the abuse material. So a police car chase actually happened. However, the police tracked him down, they got him, they pulled him over, and they managed to recover all of the evidence from the car that they needed. So the police took all of the evidence down to the police station to be sorted through, to be analysed, and what was on these hard drives absolutely shocked them. They were horrified and disgusted, because on these hard drives were hundreds and hundreds of videos, which I cannot believe that there was that many, hundreds and hundreds. And all of these videos showed Samuel and Britney abusing girls. And the abuse on these videos and in these images that they found was the most horrific sexual abuse imaginable. It was truly sickening. The officers that were working on this case have said that it is the worst material that they have ever witnessed in their whole careers. And the full details of what the sexual abuse was, the details of these videos and images, has never been released to the public. It is that bad. All we know is that in these videos and images, Britney and Samuel were sexually abusing these girls in every way imaginable. It was said that they used, quote, the most extreme cruelty and brutality. And I don't think we need to know the details of the sexual abuse. I think we all know how bad it would have been. The videos also show Britney tying the girls up, drugging them, subduing them in the worst kinds of ways. They were also physically assaulted and mentally assaulted. And the police had all the evidence that they needed. Everything was there right in front of them on video and in images. So the police straight away arrested both Samuel and Britney. So the police now begin their detailed investigation, because even though they had all of these videos and images, the only victim that they had identified was Girl D. She is the only one that had come forward at this point. But obviously, there were multiple victims in these videos and images, multiple different girls. And now the police had the job of trying to identify all of these victims. So this is when the police went straight to the public. They turned to the public to help them identify the victims in these videos. And they gave the public images of Britney, all of her information, the websites that she used to advertise her babysitting services. And the police basically asked the public, if you have ever used this woman's babysitting services, please can you come forward? And one day in 2016, Luann, who is the mom of Girl B, was just sat on her phone. She was scrolling through a news feed when she came across an article about a pedophile babysitter being arrested. And of course, in the article was the image of Britney. And as soon as Luann saw Britney's picture, that was a face that she was never going to forget. Her jaw hit the ground and she was absolutely horrified that Britney had been arrested because she was a pedophile, along with her boyfriend Samuel. And obviously Luann, she had this gut feeling that something had happened to her daughter. So Luann went forward to the police, and very sadly it was confirmed that Girl B was a victim of Britney and Samuel's. She was one of the victims that was in these videos and images. And this is when Luann's nightmares were confirmed. She had truly hoped that nothing had happened to her daughter, but sadly that was not the case. Other parents did come forward. The parents of Girl C came forward, and it was confirmed that Girl C was also a victim of Britney and Samuel's. And the parents of Girl A came forward as well. And again, it was confirmed that Girl A was also in these videos and images. And I just cannot even imagine what they would have been feeling. They trusted Britney with the most precious thing in the world to them, their children. And Britney abused their children in the worst ways imaginable. She abused her position of power. She exploited the fact that she was a babysitter, and she used it as a perfect cover. And there may be many more victims of Britney and Samuel. The police never actually revealed how many victims they discovered on these videos and images. We don't have an exact number, so we may never know how widespread this sexual abuse actually became. I wouldn't be surprised though if there were more victims. However, no more victims' families came forward. Police could not track down anyone else. So this is when authorities proceeded with prosecuting both Britney and Samuel with the 4 victims that had been identified. And this was in 2016 that they were both arrested and charged, and they were facing over 35 felony charges. But unbelievably, they both pled not guilty, even though there is literally video evidence of both of them abusing children. It's literally clear as day, black and white. They both decided to plead not guilty. And the legal proceedings now in today's case would drag on for so long. Because Samuel's trial was first, and he did not go to trial until 2019, which is 3 years after he was arrested, which is ridiculous. It's like, why is it taking that long? And it only took the jury 2 hours to decide that he was guilty. And thankfully, and I am truly happy to say this, but unlike a lot of the cases that we cover on today's channel, especially when it comes to sex offenders, Samuel was punished to the fullest extent. He received 8 life sentences without the possibility of parole. And then on top of that, he also received an extra 300 years in prison just in case any of those life sentences got overturned. And I'm very thankful that that means that Samuel is never going to get let out of prison. And I am so thankful for the judge actually giving a prison sentence that matches the crimes. So, round of applause. Thank you so much, judge, in today's case. So then Britney's trial was supposed to happen. However, things got delayed even more, and then things got delayed even more because the pandemic. And unbelievably, we get to 2023 and Britney still hasn't gone to trial, which is mind-blowing. This is 7 years now after she was arrested. 7 years and she still hasn't gone to prison. It just doesn't make any sense. And the parents of the victims were absolutely appalled that it was taking so long. I mean, this is completely unfair on the victims in today's case. They just wanted closure. They wanted all of this to be over. They didn't want this constantly looming over their head, because the victims in today's case, they're obviously children. Well, the youngest child in 2023 would have been 10 years old, and the oldest would have been 14. They would have had this looming over their head, the possibility that they would have to testify in court. It's just not fair. And the mother of girl B, Luann, she gave an interview to a local news channel complaining about how bad these delays were.
You hug your daughter closer. Excuse me. And then just wanting and waiting then for all the answers, right? You want some type of understanding, confirmation, closure.
That closure nowhere close to happening. While Lyon's boyfriend was sentenced in 2021 to multiple life terms in connection to the molestation of several children, Lyon's trial hasn't even started. It's been nearly 7 years. Luann's daughter is now 11.
The parents in this case are pretty frustrated, I think, not only on the part of us, but more so the kids. This has just been delayed and delayed and delayed. And so that in itself is fairly frustrating, right? Where the victims are not being prioritized, or the delays may be strategic in nature.
I just cannot imagine the toll that this would have been taking on the victims of today's case. It's just so disgusting and unfair. Sometimes I do think that the victims are forgotten about in the criminal justice system, and they should be the top priority. And then finally, and I really do mean finally, just a few months ago, in May of 2025. So there was still 2 more years of delays, which again, it's like, why? Why is there even more delays? This is 9 whole years now since Britney got arrested. Well, in May of 2025, this is when Britney decides to change her plea to guilty, which is just insane to me. There is a huge part of me that is thankful that she changed her plea to guilty because, number one, there will be no trial, and therefore the victims won't have to be put through a trial and possibly have to stand up in court and testify, which can be traumatic in itself. However, there is another part of me that is so angry that Britney was allowed to do this. She pleaded not guilty 9 years ago, and it has dragged out for 9 years. That is so long for the victims to have to endure that. This would have been hanging over their head, not knowing if Britney was going to be found guilty or not, never being able to actually get closure for what happened to them. It's just unfair. But anyway, in August of 2025 was when Britney was finally sentenced, which is why I'm now covering this case now, because it's ridiculous that they were arrested in 2016 and Britney was only sentenced last month. Well, Britney was given a prison sentence of 100 years. And you can see videos of her in court crying like we are supposed to feel sorry for her.
The defendant is a monster. There's just no other way to describe it. Absolute monster for the havoc that she's wreaked upon our society, upon our citizens. It's deplorable. It's disgusting.
However, things are not over just yet, because infuriatingly, and I really do mean that, it's so infuriating, there is currently a loophole in the Californian system called the elderly parole laws, which allows elderly prisoners to apply for parole when they reach the age of 50. And this law excludes murderers, so they're not going to release murderers once they reach the age of 50, thank God. And it also excludes people that have been given a whole life sentence without the possibility of parole, like Samuel. So thankfully Samuel won't fall into this loophole and he will not be released. So for anybody that is allowed to apply for parole, this loophole applies to them. And therefore this loophole applies to Britney.
The delays are one concern. Another for Luann, resentencing legislation. Since her case started, there have been several laws passed in California. Luann worried that if convicted, Lyon could either get out early or not receive what she feels is a just sentence.
If all of us don't speak up about the increased crime in general, but particularly with these extremely heinous and violent crimes, then I don't know what that says about our system.
So under this loophole, even though Britney has been sentenced to 100 years in prison for some of the worst child abuse possible, she can apply for parole when she reaches 50. Which is just insanity to me. She could still pose a threat to children when she's 50. Now, I do understand why this loophole exists. However, this loophole should not include sex offenders, especially sex offenders that have committed offences as bad as Britney. So even though she's allowed to apply for parole when she's 50, fingers crossed, it is not granted, because she should never see the light of day again. And in the aftermath of this case, the victims and their families are still trying to deal with what happened to them and try to move on. I mean, of course they are. Britney was only sentenced last month. They have had to relive what has happened to them for all this time, and they have only just gotten the justice that they deserve.
Luann no longer uses any online babysitting service. She encourages other parents, do as much research as you can while hiring someone, and for her, these are her biggest resource, telling babysitting candidates.
You know, I have cameras in my home. Just want you to be aware. It's for, my protection and yours. If I could give tips to just avoid one instance, it would be worth it.
While her daughter is thriving now, she hopes her story will keep other parents on alert.
I just could not sit idly by.
You know how strong you are, right, as a mom?
You do a lot of things for your kids.
During Britney's sentencing, one mother said to Britney, quote, "You are the most sick and evil monster that society has. What you did to these innocent and most helpless of children without any conscience, care or concern or ounce of remorse is unfathomable. You lied and betrayed the trust of numerous parents over and over again for years." And then another parent said, "We let you into our home and into our lives. Because of that, my family has endured almost 10 years of suffering and pain. The betrayal is a wound that has never healed, and my heart goes out to every single victim of today's case and their families. What they had to go through was absolutely despicable, and I am so sorry that the criminal justice system dragged this out for so long, and I just wish every single one of them the best. And that brings us to the end of today's absolutely heartbreaking case. As always, let me know your thoughts, theories and opinions, and don't forget to leave me your case suggestions in the comments down below, because I always want to know what you want to hear next. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you all in my next one. Bye.